The master of Mississippi always chose the weakest man to fight. But what followed caught everyone off guard. Deep in Mississippi, during 1858, Master Calvin Thornwood maintained a brutal tradition. Whenever a slave became unproductive, he'd summon them for a final battle right in the plantation's heart, beneath the blazing sun, with everyone watching. The rules were straightforward. Victory meant freedom. Defeat meant death in combat. For the master, this served two purposes: eliminating those who'd outlived their usefulness and instilling terror throughout the workforce. He'd select anyone, an elderly man, a feeble young laborer, even a sick child. His violence became the plantation's entertainment. 23 men had confronted him. 23 men had perished. Yet on a sticky August morning, events took an unexpected turn. The man Thornwood summoned that day had been behaving oddly for weeks, dragging himself slower, coughing more frequently, tripping in the cotton fields. Everyone assumed he was dying. Everyone except one person. When the master presented his challenge, absolute quiet fell across the plantation. The supposedly weak man moved forward. His eyes showed no fear. His steps revealed no hesitation. And at that moment, certain elderly slaves recognized something. A pattern they'd witnessed before. A strategy predating the plantation itself. What transpired next would transform everything. But the master remained clueless about what approached. Before continuing this remarkable tale of revenge, remember to subscribe to the channel and mention which city you're observing this battle from. Let's proceed. Thornwood Plantation sprawled across 4,000 acres of Mississippi Delta ground, fertile, dark earth that yielded cotton in massive quantities, the sort of land that enriched white men while black people endured suffering. During 1858, the plantation operated at maximum output. 320 enslaved individuals labored from sunrise to sunset, 6 days weekly, receiving only Sunday afternoons for recuperation. They inhabited rows of crude shacks behind the main residence, rested on wooden boards, received portions of cornmeal and salted pork, wore garments fashioned from the cheapest materials, existed in continuous exhaustion and dread. Calvin Thornwood possessed all this, having inherited the estate from his father, Richard Thornwood, during 1851. Calvin was 28 upon becoming master, youthful, driven, and determined to surpass his father's achievements. Richard had operated as a conventional plantation owner. Harsh certainly, but consistently harsh. Whipping for violations, selling to separate families, overworking until bodies collapsed. Standard control methods employed across plantations. But Calvin desired something more extreme. He wanted complete domination. Wanted his slaves to dread him beyond anything they'd felt for his father. He researched control techniques, read about breaking horses, adapted those principles to breaking humans, developed psychological torture methods, unpredictable violence patterns, spectacles crafted to traumatize and horrify. His most effective spectacle was the combat. The ritual began during March 1855. A man named Abraham had turned 63 that year. Arthritis had gnarled his hands. Decades of fieldwork had permanently bent his back. He couldn't match younger workers' pace. He slowed his picking group. Calvin observed his struggle for a week. Then one morning summoned him to the workyard center, announced to the gathered slaves that Abraham would fight him. If Abraham won, freedom awaited. If he lost, well, freedom wouldn't matter anymore. Abraham felt terrified, recognized his impossibility against a vigorous young master. Yet what alternative existed? Refusal meant whipping until death. Fighting at least offered a slim survival chance. So he fought, raised his arthritic hands, attempted defense. Calvin toyed with him for 30 seconds, let him throw ineffectual punches that missed. Then Calvin retaliated, one tremendous strike to Abraham's jaw. The elderly man collapsed, didn't rise. Calvin kicked his ribs, his head, his back. continued kicking until Abraham ceased moving, ceased breathing, expired in the dirt while 300 people observed. Calvin stood over the corpse, breathing heavily, covered in Abraham's blood, and he grinned, surveyed the terrified faces. Anyone else planning to slow down, planning to become worthless? This represents your future. This waits for you. The message was unmistakable. Labor until collapse or die fighting. Those represented the sole choices. Other plantation owners heard about Calvin's approach. Some disapproved. Charles Morrison from the adjacent plantation told Calvin he was destroying valuable assets, that selling elderly or ill slaves made more economic sense than eliminating them. But Calvin disagreed. Fear outweighs any sale price of a worn-out slave. One dead man in the dirt teaches 100 others to intensify their work. That productivity increase compensates for the loss. And he proved correct. During months following Abraham's death, Thornwood Plantation productivity rose 12%. People worked through pain, concealed illness, pushed beyond boundaries. Because the alternative was the circle, was the master's fists, was public death. The system functioned and Calvin maintained it. Across 3 years, 23 men perished in that circle. Not all elderly, not all sick. Some were merely unfortunate, had accidents leaving them partially impaired, caught fevers weakening them, developed persistent coughs. Anything marking them as less than fully productive made them targets. Calvin would observe, would wait until someone couldn't conceal their weakness anymore, then summon them, force them to fight, force them to die. The 23 deaths had names, had histories, had families mourning them. Abraham came first, then Isaac, who'd broken his leg and never recovered properly. Then Moses, who'd developed lung disease. Then Samuel, whose back injury prevented heavy lifting. Then Josiah, who'd gone partially blind. One by one, month following month, the death count accumulated and terror intensified. Yet terror also generates other things: resentment, hatred, and in certain individuals determination to resist. The enslaved couldn't openly rebel. Mississippi law prevented that. Any gathering exceeding 5 slaves without white supervision was forbidden. Teaching slaves to read was forbidden. Slaves testifying against whites in court was forbidden. The entire legal structure aimed to make organized resistance impossible. Yet the enslaved found alternative methods. Quiet methods, patient methods, methods remaining invisible until action occurred. Elijah was among those patient ones, born during 1824 on a South Carolina plantation. His mother's name was Ruth. His father's name remained unknown. Could have been any of several white men who raped his mother throughout the years. Elijah was sold at 15 when his original master died and the estate was liquidated. A trader purchased him, chained him with 20 other slaves, marched them overland to Mississippi, sold them at Jackson auction. Elijah went to Richard Thornwood for N150. Considered a solid investment. Youthful, robust, intelligent enough for quick learning, yet not so intelligent as to threaten. Elijah had spent 19 years on Thornwood Plantation. Had observed Richard Thornwood operate it for 4 years. Had observed Calvin take over during 1851. Had witnessed the transition from traditional brutality to Calvin's refined sadism. Had witnessed all 23 deaths in the circle. And throughout it all, Elijah had been cautious, had performed the role of compliant slave, industrious, obedient, unthreatening, never gave overseers reason to notice him, never attracted attention, simply survived and observed, constantly observed. Because Elijah was learning, was studying Calvin's methods, was analyzing how the fights operated. Calvin was strong, unquestionably, 6 feet tall, 200 bulb of muscle, possessed natural athletic gifts, but he lacked training. Didn't understand formal fighting techniques. Relied on fury and power, relied on opponents being feeble, frightened, and incapable of proper defense. Against elderly men and sick children, That sufficed. Yet what would happen against someone capable of actual resistance? Someone youthful and powerful who understood fighting. The question fascinated Elijah, but he had no combat experience, no fighting knowledge beyond desperate conflicts, occasionally erupting between slaves, no techniques enabling victory over a man outweigh him by 40 lb. So Elijah did something quietly revolutionary. He sought knowledge from the plantation's oldest residents, those remembering Africa, those transported on slave ships, those carrying memories from before bondage. A woman named Sarah existed. She'd inhabited Thornwood Plantation for 43 years, had been brought from West Africa during 1815 at age 22, had survived the Middle Passage, had survived 4 decades of slavery. She reached 65 during 1858, too elderly for demanding field work, yet kept alive because her midwife and healer skills proved valuable. Knew herbs and remedies, could deliver infants and treat illnesses. The plantation required her abilities, even as her body failed. Sarah also possessed knowledge unknown to white people. Combat techniques from her homeland. The Igbo people from modern Nigeria maintained warrior traditions, understood fighting larger opponents, knew pressure points and vulnerable body areas, understood turning enemy strength against them. This knowledge held no value in slavery, would only cause death if attempted. Yet Sarah remembered, and when Elijah approached her quietly one evening, when he asked whether she knew fighting techniques, she understood his intentions. "You want to confront the master." She spoke it as statement, not question. They were isolated near the well. Nobody could overhear. Elijah nodded. "I'm exhausted from watching people die. Exhausted from living in terror. I want to attempt something. Even if it kills me, want to at least try." Sarah examined him, saw the resolve, saw the anger accumulated over 19 years, finally responded, "I can instruct you. Not everything that would require years, but sufficient to possibly win a confrontation if your opponent doesn't anticipate resistance." Over subsequent months, Sarah secretly taught Elijah. After dark in concealed locations, she demonstrated striking points for maximum effect. The solar plexus to disable breathing, the liver to create debilitating agony, the throat to strangle, the eyes to blind. The knees to she demonstrated leverage usage, how smaller individuals could throw larger ones, how to redirect force instead of directly opposing it. She demonstrated footwork, movement patterns, strike avoidance, angle creation. Ancient knowledge transmitted across generations, now weaponized for one desperate purpose. Yet knowledge alone proved insufficient. Elijah required opportunity, required Calvin to select him for the circle. Yet Calvin only selected the feeble, the obviously failing. So Elijah had to appear feeble, had to convince everyone, including Calvin, that he was deteriorating, that he was becoming burdensome, that he deserved selection. During June 1858, Elijah began his act, started moving slower in the fields, would drop his cotton sack as if hands couldn't grip properly, would stumble at nothing, would cough frequently as if developing lung disease. Minor things initially, easily dismissed as temporary, yet consistent. Day after day, week after week, the performance intensified. Elijah deliberately lost weight, ate less, made himself appear gaunt, hollowed his cheeks, slumped his shoulders to seem smaller, made movements appear laborious, made every task seem tremendously difficult. The overseers noticed Marcus Kane was head overseer, a brutal man holding the position for 6 years. He reported to Calvin that Elijah seemed to be deteriorating rapidly. "Don't understand what's affecting him. Maybe consumption, maybe simply worn out, but he's becoming problematic, slowing his entire work group." Calvin came to observe, watched Elijah for several days, saw the stumbling, the coughing, the apparent weakness, decided Elijah was finished, would soon need disposal. started planning the next demonstration. Yet one person perceived through Elijah's act. Sarah obviously knew because she was assisting his planning. Yet there was also a young woman named Grace. She was 23. Had been born on the plantation, was beautiful despite slavery's hardships, and she loved Elijah. They'd been together for 2 years, not married. Slaves couldn't legally marry, yet together in every meaningful way. Grace understood Elijah better than anyone, knew his actual strength, knew his intelligence, and she recognized what he was doing. She confronted him one night. They were alone in his cabin. "You're planning something. Planning to be selected for the circle. Planning to fight Calvin." Elijah didn't deny it. Couldn't lie to her. "I must attempt something. Can't simply wait to age and die in that circle like everyone else." Grace's eyes filled with tears. "You'll die regardless. Even if you win the fight, they'll kill you afterward. You understand that. There's no escape from this." Elijah took her hands. "Maybe, probably. Yet I'd rather die fighting than die begging. Rather die attempting to harm him than die for his amusement. And possibly, I won't die. Possibly there's a survival method, an escape route, freedom." Grace wanted to believe him, wanted to think hope existed. Yet she'd watched 23 men perish, had no reason to think Elijah would differ. "If you do this," she said, "if you proceed with this, I'm losing you. Either way, you'll be gone. Then accompany me," Elijah said. "If I somehow survive, if I somehow escape, accompany me. We'll flee together, discover freedom together." Grace pulled away. "That's a dream, a fantasy. Nobody escapes Mississippi. The slave catchers always locate you, always bring you back. And even if you reached north, I'm female. I can't run like you. I'd slow you down, get us both captured." She was crying now. "I love you, but I won't observe you die in that circle. When they summon you, I'll look away. I cannot witness it happen." Elijah understood. It was excessive to request, excessive to expect anyone to observe. He held her while she wept, memorized her touch, her scent, knowing this might be their final night together, that his plan would lead to freedom or death, that either way, this existence was ending. After she departed, Elijah remained awake, considered retreating, considered abandoning the plan, considered simply continuing survival. Yet he couldn't, had progressed too far, had committed too completely, had to see it through. The summons came on August 15, 1858, a Monday morning, humid even before dawn. The temperature would reach 95 degrees by midday. The field slaves assembled in the workyard for assignments. The overseers were organizing crews when Calvin emerged from the big house. He dressed casually, white linen shirt, dark trousers, leather boots. He moved with the confidence of someone undefeated, someone who'd killed 23 men and felt unbeatable. Marcus Kane rang the bell. 3 sharp strikes, the signal meaning stop everything. The signal meaning someone would soon die. All work halted. All 312 slaves assembled. They understood what approached, had witnessed it 23 times previously, knew every ritual detail. The circle marked in dirt. The fight that wasn't genuinely a fight, the inevitable death. Some appeared resigned. Some appeared terrified. All appeared trapped. Calvin surveyed the crowd. Let tension build, let fear spread. Enjoyed the moment's power. Finally spoke. "We've got dead weight on this plantation. Individuals not contributing their share. Individuals consuming resources without producing value." His eyes found Elijah in the crowd. Elijah stepped forward. The crowd parted, created a path. Elijah walked through it, head lowered, shoulders slumped, every movement suggesting exhaustion and defeat. He stopped 15 feet from Calvin, didn't look up, played his role perfectly. "You've been declining?" Calvin said, getting weak, becoming useless. "I've observed you, seen you stumbling around, coughing, acting incapable of basic work. So, we'll resolve this the customary way. You and me, right here, right now. Same rules as always. You win, you're free. You lose." He smiled. That terrible smile the slaves had learned to dread. "Well, you won't need to worry about fatigue anymore." The white overseers laughed. They formed a loose circle around the workyard. 6 of them, all carrying whips and clubs, all present to prevent any slave interference, all confident about the outcome. They'd witnessed this 23 times, knew how it ended. Another dead slave, another reminder of who held power, another day at Thornwood Plantation. Yet something occurred, giving Calvin pause. Elijah raised his head, looked directly into Calvin's eyes, and smiled. Not a submissive smile, not a fearful smile, a knowing smile. The smile of someone possessing a secret. "I accept your challenge, Master. Let's discover what happens." The way Elijah said, "Master," felt wrong, carried mockery, carried disrespect, carried confidence that shouldn't exist. Calvin felt something unfamiliar, a flicker of uncertainty. Yet he'd issued the challenge, had witnesses, couldn't retreat now without appearing weak. "Marcus, mark the circle," he ordered. Marcus Kane used a stick to scratch a circle in the dirt, 20 feet in diameter, standard size. 23 men had perished within that circle, about to become 24. Calvin removed his shirt, revealed his physique, 6 feet tall, 200 L of muscle, arms thickened by years of riding and manual labor, chest broad, shoulders powerful. He was in his prime at 35. Appeared as what he was, a dangerous man. The slaves who'd never seen him shirtless murmured. Their fear intensified. How could anyone fight that? Then Elijah removed his shirt and everything transformed. His body wasn't wasted whatsoever. Was lean and defined, muscles clearly visible beneath skin, scars everywhere, back, chest, arms, testimony to 19 years of enslavement. Yet beneath the scars lay strength. Genuine strength. Not the weakness appearance he'd projected for 2 months. His actual body. Grace gasped. Severa nodded slightly. Several elderly slaves who'd suspected smiled grimly. The deception was exposed. Calvin stared, felt rage building. "You've been deceiving me, pretending weakness, making me appear foolish." Elijah shrugged. "You chose to believe what you observed, chose to think I was dying. That's not my fault. That's yours." The insolence was shocking. Slaves didn't address masters like that, didn't display defiance, didn't mock. Calvin's hands clenched into fists. "I'll kill you slowly. Make you regret every word, every lie, every moment you thought yourself clever." "Possibly," Elijah said. "Or possibly today you learn you're not invincible. That you can be defeated, that you can die." He rolled his shoulders, loosened his neck, bounced on his feet, moved like someone understanding body usage, like someone trained. Calvin felt uncertainty intensify, yet also rage. This slave required destruction, required demonstration, required terrible death. Marcus dropped his hand. The fight commenced. Calvin charged immediately, employed his standard tactic. Overwhelming aggression, rush forward, drive opponent back with size and violence, had worked 23 times. Yet Elijah didn't retreat, didn't panic, stepped sideways at the last moment, let Calvin's momentum carry him past. As Calvin stumbled by, Elijah drove his elbow into Calvin's ribs, hard, precisely placed, used all his weight and leverage. The impact fractured 2 ribs. Calvin gasped. Pain exploded through his chest. He'd never been hurt in these fights, never experienced genuine pain, had always inflicted it. The shock matched the injury. He turned, faced Elijah, saw the slave was still smiling. "That's for Abraham," Elijah said quietly. "For the first man you killed." Calvin roared, charged again. Swung a massive fist at Elijah's head. Yet Elijah ducked beneath it, rose inside Calvin's guard, drove 3 rapid punches into his torso. Solar plexus, liver, kidney. Sarah's instruction, strike the soft targets, cause maximum pain. Disable rather than merely hurt. Calvin staggered. Each punch landed perfectly. His breath came in gasps. The fractured ribs made every inhalation agonizing. The liver shot sent nauseating pain through his abdomen. The kidney strike made his back spasm. He was injured, seriously injured, and the fight had barely started. The slave crowd watched in absolute silence. This wasn't following the script. The master was supposed to win easily, was supposed to beat the slave to death within minutes. Yet Elijah was winning, was dominating, was making Calvin appear slow and clumsy. The implications were staggering. If the master could be defeated, if he could be injured, then perhaps he wasn't as powerful as he seemed. Perhaps the system wasn't as strong. Perhaps resistance was possible. Calvin tried to grapple, tried using his weight advantage, charged again. This time wrapped arms around Elijah, lifted him off ground, tried throwing him, yet Elijah twisted, used techniques Sarah taught him. Found leverage points, shifted weight. Turned Calvin's strength against him, somehow reversed the throw. Calvin found himself flying through air, hit ground hard, dust erupting around him, breath knocked from lungs. Before he could recover, Elijah was atop him. Mounted his chest, fists raining down, face, throat, temples. Each strike calculated, each designed for maximum damage. Calvin tried covering up, tried protecting his head, yet strikes continued. His nose shattered, blood poured from nostrils, lips split, teeth broke, eyes began swelling shut. The beating was systematic, methodical. 19 years of accumulated anger channeled into focused violence. Marcus Cain started moving forward, started to intervene. The master was losing, was being badly beaten. This couldn't continue. Yet Sarah stepped directly into his path, an elderly woman blocking a young overseer. The master declared it a fair fight. She said loudly, loud enough for everyone to hear, declared the rules straightforward. Victory means freedom, defeat means death. Those were his words. You interfere now, you prove his word worthless. Prove he can't win his own fights. Marcus hesitated. She was correct. Calvin had made this public, had announced rules before witnesses. If overseers interfered, it would undermine everything, would demonstrate the master's promises. Lies would demonstrate he couldn't win without assistance. The other overseers exchanged uncertain glances, wanting to help, yet trapped by rules Calvin himself created. Inside the circle, the beating continued. Elijah's fist struck down repeatedly. Calvin was barely conscious. His face was destroyed, blood everywhere, bones broken. He weakly tried pushing Elijah off, yet possessed no remaining strength, no leverage, no defense. He was being beaten to death before his own slaves, before his overseers, before everyone supposed to fear him. Finally, Elijah stopped, stood, looked down at Calvin, semi-conscious, bleeding heavily, barely breathing. You declared I'd win freedom? Elijah said loudly enough for everyone to hear. You declared those were the rules. You lose, I'm free. That's your promise. He surveyed the assembled crowd, ensuring every witness heard. Establishing his claim. I won according to your own rules. I'm free. For a moment, nobody moved. The slaves were shocked. The whites were paralyzed by disbelief. Then Marcus found his voice. You're a dead man. You understand that, right? Even if you won the fight, you can't walk away from this. We'll hunt you. We'll kill you. And it'll be slow. It'll be painful. We'll create an example lasting days. Elijah nodded. Probably. Yet for now, for these few minutes, I'm free. I defeated him. I won. And I want everyone here to remember this. Remember he's merely human, that he bleeds, that he can be defeated. Remember you needn't accept this, that resistance is possible. He looked directly at the slaves. Addressed them, not the whites. Remember me. Remember what happened here. And when your moment arrives, when you receive your opportunity, be prepared. Be brave. Fight back. That's when other whites arrived. Plantation owners from neighboring properties who'd been visiting. Guests from the big house who'd been watching from the porch. Other overseers who'd been working distant fields. They came running hearing the commotion. Came to restore order, to punish this insurrection, to create an example. Within minutes, 20 white men surrounded Elijah, all armed, some with guns, some with whips, some with clubs. 20 against 1. No survival chance. Yet Sarah had planned for this, had spent weeks preparing, had recruited allies, had created contingency plans. The moment whites began closing on Elijah, she shouted one word, an Igbo word, her native African language, a word whites didn't comprehend. Ugbu. Now and the plantation exploded into coordinated chaos. 60 slaves moved simultaneously, not attacking whites. That would have been suicide, yet creating confusion, running different directions, screaming, making noise, dropping tools with loud crashes, creating sensory overload. The whites couldn't focus on Elijah because they were overwhelmed by motion and sound and confusion. Couldn't shoot into the crowd without hitting each other or valuable property. Were momentarily paralyzed. In that chaos, Elijah ran, sprinted toward the tree line, toward the woods, toward the slim escape chance. The whites started firing. Gunshots cracked through humid air. Bullets buzzed past Elijah. Most missed, yet one caught his left shoulder. The impact spun him, dropped him to one knee. Pain exploded through his upper body, yet he forced himself up, kept running, reached the trees, vanished into forest. Behind him, the plantation descended into chaos. Whites shouting orders, dogs barking, the hunt beginning. Yet the chaos bought Elijah precious time. By the time whites organized pursuit, by the time they readied dogs, Elijah had a 15-minute head start, and he'd prepared for this. Had spent weeks planning escape routes. Had marked trees with subtle signs only he recognized. Had hidden supplies along possible paths. Had created false trails. Had done everything possible to maximize survival chances. The bullet wound in his shoulder was serious yet not fatal. The round had passed through muscle without hitting bone or major vessels. It hurt terribly, bled heavily, would probably infect. Yet wouldn't stop him immediately. He ran for an hour, put distance between himself and the plantation, then stopped at a hidden cache, pulled supplies buried weeks earlier, cloth for bandaging, a knife, dried food, a water canteen, worked quickly, binding his wound, stopped bleeding, then continued moving. The next 3 days blurred with pain and determination. Elijah moved mostly at night, slept in hidden places during daylight, followed streams masking scent from dogs, avoided roads and settlements, survived on cached supplies and foraged food. The shoulder wound infected on the second day. Fever set in. His body shook with chills despite August heat, yet he continued north. Always north, following the North Star, following the path to freedom. Behind him, Thornwood Plantation was in turmoil. Calvin survived the beating, yet barely. Spent 2 weeks in bed. Town doctor said he'd live, yet would never be the same. Broken bones healed, wrong, face permanently disfigured. Lost his right eye, suffered constant pain from injuries. Yet worse than physical damage was psychological wound. He'd been publicly defeated by a slave. Everyone had witnessed his mystique shattered, his authority destroyed. He was merely human, capable of bleeding, losing, humiliation. Other plantation owners were horrified. Not by Calvin's methods, most approved those, yet by his failure. He'd shown weakness, had allowed a slave to defeat him, had created dangerous precedent. The story spread rapidly. Within days, every county slave knew about Elijah beating Master Thornwood. The story gave them hope, gave them ideas, gave them belief that resistance was possible. The plantation owners recognized this danger, tried suppressing the story, claimed Elijah cheated somehow, claimed Calvin was ill, made excuses. Yet slaves knew truth, had witnessed it, couldn't be convinced otherwise. Calvin sent slave catchers after Elijah, professional bounty hunters, specializing in tracking runaways, offered 1,000 reward, enormous sum, sufficient motivating hunters from multiple states. They searched for weeks, found Elijah's traces, blood on leaves from wounded shoulder, footprints in mud, evidence of campsites, yet never caught him, never even approached. Because Elijah had assistance. The Underground Railroad, the secret network helping escaped slaves, reach free states. Conductors had observed Thornwood Plantation, had heard about Calvin's brutality, had sought ways to help. When they learned about Elijah's escape, about his courageous fight, they mobilized resources, found him in Tennessee. He was barely alive. Infection had nearly killed him. Body wasted from fever and food deprivation. Yet he'd escaped Mississippi, was within freedom's reach. The conductors concealed Elijah in a root cellar for 2 weeks, treated infected wound, fed him, let him recover strength, then moved him along network from Tennessee to Kentucky, from Kentucky to Ohio. Each journey leg risky, each border crossing dangerous. Yet conductors were experienced, had moved hundreds of escaped slaves, new routes, new safe houses, new avoiding slave catchers. During October 1858, Elijah crossed into Ohio, collapsed in a Quaker family's home named Miller, was delirious with fever. The Millers nursed him back to health. Took weeks, yet slowly Elijah recovered. His shoulder healed, his strength returned, and for the first time in his existence, he was free. Actually legally free, standing on free soil. No longer property, a human being with rights. Yet freedom brought grief. Elijah had left people behind. Grace, the woman he loved. Sarah, who taught him fighting, the 60 slaves who'd created chaos aiding his escape. He learned later Sarah had been whipped nearly to death punishing her role. That 3 other slaves had been sold south. That Grace had been sold to an Alabama plantation. All because they'd helped him. The guilt was crushing. He'd won his freedom at cost of their suffering. Elijah attempted returning for them, attempted organizing rescue, contacted abolitionists, offered guiding a raid, yet they refused. Too dangerous, too likely failing, too likely getting everyone killed. Told him his best action was surviving, building a life, proving escape possible, being a hope symbol. It wasn't the answer he wanted, yet it was the only realistic one. During 1861, the Civil War started. Elijah immediately volunteered, joined the 1st Kansas Colored Infantry, one of the first black regiments, was 37 years old, yet strong and experienced, fought at Island Mound during October 1862, fought at Honey Springs during July 1863, survived multiple battles, rose to sergeant, led men in combat, killed Confederate soldiers without hesitation or guilt. Each represented the system enslaving him. Each death was justice. When war ended during 1865, Elijah was 41. He returned to Mississippi as occupying Union forces, went back to Thornwood Plantation, found it burned, abandoned. Calvin had fled when Union troops approached, never returned. The plantation was seized by government. The land was supposed redistributing to freed slaves, yet that promise was broken. Eventually, land sold to northern investors. Freed slaves received nothing. Elijah found Sarah still there. She'd survived the war, was 72 free, yet with nowhere to go, no resources, no support. Elijah took her north, settled her in Cincinnati, paid for her care, visited regularly, listened to her stories. She lived 3 more years, died during 1868. Her final words to Elijah were, "You made it count. You made my sacrifice worthwhile. Thank you." Elijah attempted finding Grace, learned she'd been sold multiple times. Last known location was a Mobile, Alabama plantation. Yet by the time he traced her there during 1866, she was gone, dead from cholera during 1864. Never knew slavery ended, never knew Elijah survived, never experienced freedom. The loss devastated Elijah. He'd hoped finding her, reuniting, building life together. Yet that dream died with her. Elijah settled in Ohio, married a woman named Rebecca during 1867. She was a former Kentucky slave, understood his pain, his nightmares, his survivor's guilt. They built life together, had 7 children, worked hard, bought land, farmed, raised children in freedom, taught them reading and writing, sent them to school, gave opportunities he'd never possessed. Yet Elijah never forgot August 15th, 1858. Never forgot the fight. Never forgot those who'd helped him. He told the story often to his children, grandchildren, anyone listening, ensured it was recorded, ensured it was preserved. The story of the day a slave defeated his master in single combat. The day the impossible occurred. The day one man's courage inspired hundreds. Elijah lived until 1903, died at 79, had 14 grandchildren by then, 23 great-grandchildren, all free, all educated, all aware of their grandfather's actions. His funeral was attended by over 200 people, black and white. Veterans who'd served with him, abolitionists who'd helped escape, family loving him, friends respecting him. They buried him in a Cincinnati cemetery. His gravestone read, Elijah Freeman, born into bondage, 1824, died in freedom, 1903. He fought back. The story of Elijah and Calvin spread through multiple communities. The black community preserved it carefully. Past generations told it as proof masters could be defeated. The system could be resisted. Courage mattered. The story was embellished over time. Some versions claimed Elijah killed Calvin. Some claimed he freed all plantation slaves. Some claimed he was 7 feet tall and killed 10 men bare-handed. Exaggerations, yet all based on core truth that a slave defeated his master and escaped freedom. White historians attempted suppressing the story, claimed it never happened, claimed no documentation existed, claimed it was a myth inspiring slave rebellions. Yet too much evidence existed. Court records showed Calvin Thornwood owned a Mississippi plantation. Census records showed he owned slaves. Newspaper articles from 1858 mentioned a Thornwood plantation incident involving an escaped slave. Veteran records showed a man named Elijah Freeman served in the 1st Kansas Colored Infantry. The pieces could assemble. Truth could be found if searched. During 2010, local historians and civil rights activists coalition successfully lobbied for a historical marker. It was placed on County Road 12, where Thornwood Plantation once stood. The land is farmland now. Soybeans and corn where cotton once grew. Yet the marker acknowledges what happened. Reed's site of Thornwood Plantation 1847 to 1865. During August 1858, an enslaved man named Elijah defeated his master Calvin Thornwood in single combat and escaped freedom. His courage inspired countless others resisting oppression. His story reminds us that even during darkest times, resistance is possible. Small acknowledgement, incomplete account, yet better than nothing, better than silence, better than pretending it never occurred. The marker receives visitors. Elijah's descendants come seeing where it happened. Civil rights groups bring students learning the story. People leave flowers and stones, small tributes to a man refusing his fate. Who fought back? Who won? What do you think of Elijah's story? Was his violence justified? Should he have run instead, fighting? Should Sarah and others helped him knowing consequences? Should he feel guilty about suffering his escape caused others? These questions lack easy answers. Violence and oppression resistance is morally complex. Helping someone escape when it brings self-punishment requires extraordinary courage. Surviving when others don't creates guilt burden. Yet what's undeniable is Elijah refused his fate, chose fighting, chose freedom over safety, and through intelligence, planning, and courage, achieved the seemingly impossible. His story matters because it counters the passive slave myth. The myth that enslaved people accepted bondage, that they didn't resist, that they awaited white saviors freeing them. Stories like Elijah's prove otherwise. Prove resistance was constant, that people fought back every possible way, that they were strategic, brave, and dangerous when opportunity arose. The slavery system required overwhelming violence for maintenance, because enslaved people never stopped fighting it. If you found this story powerful, subscribe to the channel. Share with people needing understanding that resistance is always possible, that courage matters, that ordinary people can achieve extraordinary things, that oppression systems aren't permanent, that the weak aren't always weak and the strong aren't always strong. Until next time, remember, history contains countless moments when someone refused accepting injustice, when someone stood despite overwhelming odds, when someone fought back and won. Be that person when your moment arrives. Until next video.